Good evening, and welcome to the August 13th of the Livermore City Council. Call the meeting to order. Let the record show that all members of the City Council are present and accounted for, with the exception of Councilmember Spadowski, who is excused. I ask that you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, was there any reportable action taken in the closed session?
Mr. Mayor, no, there was not.
Okay, very good, thank you. We don't have any proclamations and presentations. Moving on to the Citizens Forum, these are items that are not on the agenda. The City Council can neither deliberate nor take action during the Citizens Forum. So with that, I have 4 cards. We have Greg Scott, John Stein, and Andrew Barker. Mr. Scott.
Okay, come on. Okay, come on. I'm nervous. Come on. Come on. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Come on. I'm sorry, can I go next? I just got a little nervous.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Step back. Okay, John Stein.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. I was at the last meeting and heard the mayor and council discussing the SCIU health cost limiting initiative. I believe you have First Amendment rights to express your opinions. I believe that the statements made about the negative aspects of the initiative in terms of increased costs to the city, poorer levels of service to Livermore residents, and the eventual loss of perhaps hundreds of jobs in medically related fields in the city if the initiative passes. On the other hand, there are advantages to moderating your language and when you sit on the dais. The people from the SEIU were busy scribbling the whole time. The lawsuit is obviously baseless, but perhaps you could have avoided it if you and the staff had encouraged you to moderate your language. I've always said it, may my words be soft and sweet, because sometimes I may have to eat them. In this case, I don't suggest you eat them, but I suggest when this comes up again, you express your opinions briefly and then get onto the matter at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Andrew, are you ready, Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Greg Scott.
Okay. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Marchand, Livermore City Council, City of Livermore staff, those in video land, and the audiences of the room. And I have to commend you that serve on the City Council, and I also have to commend the people that can give you the best possible challenge in the election season they can. I think we should vote, we should emphasize voice in the election process and not emphasize the infinitesimally small voter fraud that occurs. I am Greg Scott, and I speak on homelessness in Livermore. How do we figure this problem out? From an article by Stephen Fleming and Dan Bang, quote, "A key element of leadership is the decision to shoulder responsibility for the welfare of others," unquote. It is not only leadership, but the community as well, along with myself as an individual, that is responsible. We need to ethically and humanely engage the problem for those that may not have social and or economic and or racial justice. An emphasis on money is not going to solve the homeless issue. Neither is corralling the homeless. To paraphrase Dr. Richard Thaler, Professor of Behavior Science and Economics at the University of Chicago and 2017 Nobel Laureate in Economics, economic sciences, we must nudge homeless as well as ourselves to make better choices. Let us hope and pray that the ad hoc committee of the Human Services Commission has some good ideas along with pathways to implementations. Homelessness is not complicated. Lee is out there on First Street and has been out there for who knows how long. He is rotting on the concrete and asphalt as hundreds of us, if not 1,000 or more of us, pass him every day. My understanding is that Lee is Livermore High School class of 1968. Mark was living in his truck until the Livermore police towed it away. I am in no way blaming the Livermore police. It is my understanding that Mark was a former manager of a Jack in the Box restaurant here in Livermore. JR lives in the bushes and plays the cat and mouse game with the Livermore police. This is an expensive use of police resources. And I've yet to mention the women who are out there homeless. How do we, as men in the patriarchy, allow this? No homeless refuge shelter with less than 5% chance of rain and nights of above 45 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a long time without a shelter option in Livermore, California. There are the ABCs to a solution, a pathway to autonomy and self-reliance, to belonging to a healthier social and economic structure, and the fulfillment of contributing to a more resilient community. This contributing is at the top of Maslow's hierarchy and can only be accomplished if psychological and basic needs are met. Only with the commons is there any solution, and from a rational risk assessment standpoint, this needs to be a public entity.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Andrew Barker, Connie Copps, Carl Winty. Mr. Barker.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Barker. I'd like to talk to you for just a second about the intersection of First Street and Livermore Avenue in downtown. As you know, your policy designates this intersection as a pedestrian-oriented intersection with no vehicle level of service standard, so that pedestrian traffic is prioritized over vehicle traffic at this intersection. But I'm afraid I don't think your staff is really, your traffic engineering staff is really implementing this. I feel like they're applying the same kinds of standards they apply in every other intersection at this one. I could give several sort of examples of why I think that, but let me just talk about one. If you watch the traffic north and southbound on Livermore Avenue, you'll notice that they get an extended green so that the pedestrians traveling north or south get a white walking signal, a red flashing hand, and then a solid red hand. And there's a solid red hand instructing them to stop for a full 8 seconds, while north and southbound traffic gets a continued extended green. And this is time when clearly vehicle traffic is being prioritized over pedestrian traffic, which I think is not in keeping with your policy. So I'd like you to instruct your staff to do a couple of things. First is to make some kind of measurement of some kind of pedestrian level of service or something at this intersection so that they can make decisions based on your stated policy rather than the way they do at other intersections. I'd also like you to ask them to ensure that the phasing at this intersection really does prioritize pedestrians over vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Just a quick question for our city engineer. That extra 8 seconds, is that to allow the intersection to clear, give people a little opportunity to make it to the other end? We had a similar problem like that on Murrieta.
Right, it could. That's one of the reasons we sometimes do that. It also could be to clear a right turn or where you have a pedestrian conflict. We certainly can look into it.
Yeah, you give people like the red hand goes up and it gives them 8 more seconds to get across. Okay, thank you. Connie Copps and Carl Winty.
Hi, Connie Copps, 1422 Tulip Way. I'm here. I was going to actually talk about something else originally, but, you know, and after listening to Mr. Scott, I kind of really wanted to bring something up that I brought up in the past a long time ago. In 2006-ish, I, started a business, or tried to start a business. It's really hard when you're a woman, minority, and you're dealing with such other brand. We're trying to brand so much in our Tri-Valley. But I submitted this to government agencies, federal, county. I mean, I even went local to try to, especially local, to try to get us to fund some unfunded liabilities. You shouldn't have to worry about social issues like homelessness, we should be looking at it as a whole. It's hard. You should be able to go to work. You look sad over there, Mark Roberts. You look kind of sad. You got a lot on your plate. You shouldn't have to feel like it's your fault. It's a community fault. Mr. Scott really cares, and I'm so glad he cares. Our churches really care, and I'm really glad that they care. But we do need an agency with social workers who are outreaching for giving people hope. Just last month, I heard of another kid dying in his sleep, and I couldn't help but wonder. As a substitute teacher, I really love our children, and I love the hope that they've been given. But really, you get to a certain point, you hit glass ceilings, and they're unstoppable. They really are. And back when I was trying to file a patent, when I filed a patent application on this, I thought it was a patent application. They said, no, it's preliminary. And as I was going through the process, I hired an attorney to amend my claims that I wrote. And you know what she told me? She told me, she was an attorney from Berkeley. She said, you know what, I'm not going to take your application. And I said, why? She goes, well, this is all controlled by the mafia. So I told my patent examiner that, and you know what she said to me? She said, well, maybe this is all controlled by the mafia. Now, I don't think our state lottery is controlled by the mafia, but it does help our schools a lot. Well, if we help people, as Mr. Scott was talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we help people with their health and with their housing and get people, productive, maybe we'll have more working people that can contribute tax dollars to our education, to that. You should not have to worry about this. You should be worrying about our duck pond, our golf course in Springtown. You should have things like that on your plate. As a society, we need to group together to find out how we can all be on board to a solution, not just our churches. And it needs to be open books. We need to know where our money is going. It can't always be third-party agencies all the time. You go haggard trying to understand what's going on in town because so many agencies, they're all on board when it's one thing, but then when you're trying to get answers, sometimes the right hand does not know what the left hand's doing, and it needs to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Copps. Carl Winty.
Mr. Mayor, Council, how are you? Staff, again, compliments. Mr. Roberts, you and I spoke briefly on the phone, and I paid you a profuse compliment to the quality of your team and the quality of the individuals here. Thank you all so much for what you do. It's a joy living, learning about city process and city government. As such, I attended my first Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday of last week. I'd also like to pay compliments to the Planning Commission and how they went about their jobs and learning how this all functions and bubbles up and things happen within this city. And because good government is that process, right, of moving forward. Stagnation can stink up a place, and we don't want stagnation. We want things done that do the darndest to represent the majority under the bell curve, right? Not letting any singular groups drive too much of the discussion. We know well-funded organizations can get messages out. Organizations that purchase ink by the barrel, they get scary. They can put print time out there and drive things through, and we know what it is. Like at the Planning Commission, there were 12, 13 people that came up that were just reiterating the same message. Some went so far as to say, we need to revolt. You as a Planning Commission need to revolt against the City Council. That's not healthy. That's not showing awareness of how this process is working. And so those people that were there, I said it when I was there, like I condemn thee for not stepping up and telling the truth and how it goes. Like, it's just not the way to go. Now, obviously, they don't like the outcome and they're working agendas trying to get it there, but to call for a revolt by the Planning Commission towards the council, I don't know that it's productive. At one of the meetings I was at, Mr. Alcala came to me right after I was up at the microphone, and he said, Carl, you have to speak on an agendized item if it's an agendized item. If it's open, it's open. Agendized has to stay on it. So I implore council to set the culture of staying on agendized items and staff to get that in there as well, because the Planning Commission, there were a lot of people that did not stay on the agendized item. Now, thank you for letting me know, Mr. Alcala, that I didn't. I got slapped on the wrist. I said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, I'll shut off your microphone or I'll go further if I have to. So that's fine. So now I implore us to have that culture. If people are continuing to speak and call for revolt and not even speaking on agendized items, is that something that there's action to be able to be taken so we can stay within that? Mr. John Stein, what a great quote, right? May my words be soft and sweet because I may have to eat them. I have eaten a lot of words in my life. I try not to. I have eaten some words that were not so soft. I want to keep them as soft as possible. It's a process, good government, of the people, for the people, by the people. Let's keep it going. Mr. Carling, I appreciate you and how you think and ask questions and get after it, right? Let's say this is the process of how this moves forward. So we know we have election coming up. Odds are it's going to get fun, right? And so let's all engage. My generation, you out there, let's just engage. Let's be part of this process to make this town and the world a better place. Cheers, y'all. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Okay, I'm going to close the Citizens Forum. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there anyone that wishes to pull any item on the consent calendar for discussion? Okay, I do have one card on the consent calendar for 4.08. So what I'd like to do is take a motion for 4.01 through 4.07.
I'll move we accept 4.01 through 4.07.
And I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Councilmember Coomber. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. 4.08, which is the 2-year lease for the Livermore Heritage Guild. Carl Wente.
Mr. Mayor and council staff, I appreciate you. You do a great job. I enjoy talking to people, talking to as many people as I could. I called Mr. Jeff Katsky, said, "Is there any chance we can get together?" He said, "No, I'm going to be at Hageman Park on Sunday, so I can't make it." And so I went down to Hageman Park, and I just want to pay compliments to the Heritage Guild and what they do for Livermore. It's a great spot. Kids learning things, the animals, the old equipment, making soap, making candles, all these different things. It supports the culture of Livermore and who we are and our heritage. So I don't know the exact, I tried to become a lifetime member of the Heritage Guild because I wanted to and to support Livermore and who we are. So I just want to pay compliments to them and what they do. Thank you.
And had you not pulled 4.08, I was going to, because I wanted to echo the same thing. This is a remarkable effort that's out there. This is the last vestige of where the Tri-Valley began at Hageman Farm. And the programs that you guys have out there, and the fact that a lot of the community groups get together on the community service days and go down to help Hageman Farm is just really a wonderful gathering place for the community. And I'd also like to underscore and recognize Augie Hageman. Augie Hageman passed away last month, and Augie was just a great guy. I served on the Zone 7 Water Board with Augie for a number of years, and he served this community for generations. And you may not know it, but he was the president of the Alameda County Wool Growers Association, which underscores just how agrarian this area was. So I just wanted to recognize the great work that Augie did, recognize his service to the community, and recognize his passing, because he truly was one of those titans that served the land and served the community and served the people. So great work going on at Hageman Farm. Certainly congratulations and thank you to the Heritage Guild for the great work that you're doing out there. So thank you. With that, I'll take a motion on 4.08.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Coomber, seconded by Vice Mayor Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. On to public hearings. We have a hearing to receive community input regarding the boundaries and composition of districts to be established for the district-based elections for the city of Livermore.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. The public hearing tonight is to receive community input regarding the boundaries and composition of districts to be established for district-based elections for city council members, and to provide direction to staff and the city's independent demographer regarding the preparation of draft district maps. So this evening, the presentation is going to be given by Michael Hageman, demographer of Hageman Strategies. Michael has 20 years of redistricting experience. His prior work includes serving as an analyst at the statewide database, as a line drawer for the California State Legislature, and as a liaison to the Citizens Redistricting Commission. More recently, in the Bay Area, he worked on Concord and Vacaville's transition to district elections. With him is Thomas Willis. He's outside legal counsel with Remcho, Johansson, and Purcell. He has 20 years' experience on constitutional and election law matters, including litigation and advising on redistricting and Voter Right Act issues. He successfully defended the City of Los Angeles redistricting plan against a constitutional challenge, has advised numerous cities on the CVRA, including most recently Concord and Vacaville. So I'm going to hand off the presentation to the professionals.
Good evening, council members. We'll do a quick presentation. A lot of this will be information that we went over last time. We won't go in the same level of depth, but just to kind of remind you of that information, and also to kind of empower members of the public so when they are testifying and providing you feedback, that they can know what kind of information that would be helpful to the council, and also to kind of remind you of some of the information that hopefully you can provide direction on this evening. As noted, this is the second of 4 mandated hearings under the California Voting Rights Act. The 2 big things out of this meeting is this is the meeting where you're providing direction for draft maps so that then members of the public and yourself can see different ways the city can be divided into districts and different ways districts can be configured so that then they have something more concrete to react to. The 2 big things to provide direction are, 1, how to rank the various types of criteria that can be used to draw districts, what are the priorities of the council, and 2, one of those criteria which we will touch on is communities of interest, and what are the neighborhoods and areas that need to be kept together, and what are those, which ones are the most important, and which ones maybe aren't as important to be kept together. Timeline, I won't belabor this, but again, we are on the second of 4 hearings. After this hearing, I will start my work of putting together draft maps, which will be published and available for the public. I will note that I will also digitize any maps that are submitted by members of the public. I believe there have actually already been 4 submitted. So all those maps will be presented to you in the same way as if I drew them myself, so you have them all on an even hand for your consideration as we move forward into the next hearing. Again, the next hearing, you'll start having actual maps to react to start picking which ones do a better job, which ones do a worse job, which ones you absolutely hate and want to throw rotten fruit at me for ever having drawn, and then start settling into hopefully moving towards a final map. All of this, as a reminder, is heading towards impacting your 2020 elections, and as you may recall last time, then you get to do this all over again after the next census in 2021. The city staff has been diligent in setting up various options for the public to participate and keep track of the process, including website outreach to various communities in both English and in Spanish, along with ongoing social media outreach. Criteria, as a reminder, you're trying to draw districts that are roughly of equal size as far as population. As a reminder, the population we're talking about is the population from the 2010 census, knowing that there may have in fact been changes in the population and there's been growth in the city, but the 2010 census is what you're using for current purposes. And where districts are not of the same size, you want to make sure you have a justification for why that is the case based on other traditional redistricting criteria. Traditional redistricting criteria including things like contiguous, that the whole district is connected into one big piece, that is compact, that is a measure of you'll know it when you see it, does the district boundaries look normal and rational and pretty? And if not, that doesn't mean that that's bad, it just means why is that district looking like something that isn't compact. An example in your town is your downtown area is not particularly compact. It's stretched out along one major thoroughfare. Is that something that should be kept whole, or is compactness more important? That's the kinds of directions the council needs to be providing. And then where possible, again, maintaining those communities of interest, which is something that there's no database of. I can't go look up. It's really you and the members of the public defining these are the ways that the city kind of divides itself already, and the way people look at each other for purposes of representation on this body. Race is always one of the most complicated parts when it comes to the redistricting process, as the council is no doubt aware. It is a kind of an awkward situation in that the California Voting Rights Act is explicitly talking about race and ethnicity and representation for protected classes, and is the trigger for why you're going through this process. That said, when you're actually talking about drawing the lines, race and ethnicity is something that cannot be a predominant factor. It's something you can consider, but it cannot be the primary reason you are drawing lines. So again, as highlighted on the right-hand side, amongst this laundry list of things, what are the things that are most important to do? What are the things that you want to direct me to look at as I draw lines? There may be additional factors you also want to look at that are secondary to these. So for example, the last council meeting you talked about precinct boundaries being something you may want to look at. What are any other criteria you want us to look at? Communities of interest, as I mentioned, are something where public testimony is particularly helpful. You've already started to receive testimony from members of the public on this issue. As highlighted, there's no set way of what defines a community of interest. So you can look at things like schools, shopping, housing, common culture. What are the things, employment, what are the things that really define a community as defined by that community? What makes it a community? So that's, again, where are those communities that are important to be kept whole? Phases, again, we're at the end of this evening, at the end of phase 1. That will then allow maps to be produced, which will then be where you start having actually concrete boundaries to look at, with the goal of adopting boundaries by the end of this year to impact district elections starting in 2020. As noted, communities of interest, particularly for members of the public, as providing testimony. If you are testimony as relates to communities of interest, the 3 big bullets that are helpful to both me, hopefully helpful to the council, are where is the community? We are talking about drawing district boundaries, so I have to be able to find it on a map. I'm learning about your city, but I'm not necessarily from here, so don't assume that I know where things are. And I would hate to divide a community of interest that the council has told me to keep whole just because I don't know where it is. What is it that defines that community? What are the things that the mutual interests that define it? And why is it important it be kept together? What is it? Why is that important for purposes of representation? And again, establishing priorities amongst those criteria. What are the ones that are most important for council's consideration? With that, we'll switch over and I will reorient you to our redistricting software. And I think, there we go. So this is the same redistricting software we had earlier. We can add layers here. We can zoom into areas either based on the public testimony or council direction. I will note, since the last council meeting, we did add a couple of layers. Working with staff, there was a national citizen survey, NCS, that was conducted that provided a bunch of information I'm sure the council is familiar with. That divided the city into 5 different zones. So we did add that layer. So if you wanted to look at that information, it is now available to you. We also did add the layer that represents where your police districting zones are. So if you wanted to look at that as potentially a decent proxy for some of your communities of interest, we have that along with the layers we had previously as far as kind of some of your zoning areas, your general plan areas, your precinct boundaries, your school locations. All those things are all still available to you. And with that, available for questions and or to listen to public testimony.
Questions at this point? Councilmember Carling?
So I'm still puzzled about, and you mentioned it, about one of the reasons we're being sued is because of the lack of Hispanic or Latino candidates over the years. Now there's, right? I mean, that was in the letter from the attorney, right?
So, and I will defer to counsel if I say anything that's not completely capturing the nuances of the law, but the California Voting Rights Act is specific not necessarily to ability to elect,
Sure.
but to whether Group A is voting for candidate A and Group B is voting for candidate B.
Okay, but so we do have, I mean, I would suggest that around Maryland Avenue School, we have a pretty high Hispanic population. But you're telling me that we shouldn't consider them a community of interest, or how does that work? I'm trying to understand.
You absolutely can consider them a community of interest.
Mm-hmm.
You usually, what you want to be careful of is that you're not defining them as a community of interest solely based on race. So there may be other factors that also define that area other than just it being a Hispanic area. It may be based on income, it may be based on education, it may be based on culture, but you want to have something that defines that other than, you don't want to say something to the effect of, put all the Latinos in the same district.
No, I get that. I was just looking for some other way to describe that. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
Just one point. I'm looking at one of the letters we've received and just want to make sure everybody understands. If we're talking about a 5-member council with one being the mayor, then that's 4 districts, right?
It would be the council's direction whether the CVRA does allow kind of a one-time bite at the apple of changing the governance structure. So you could change to a different governance structure. I believe the prior direction from the council has been to stick to an at-large mayor with 4 council districts.
Well, I'm just trying to get everybody to understand. You still need an odd number, so the next number up would be 7. So that would mean, right? I mean, so in other words, that would give you 6 districts. We're not going to have an odd number of districts because the mayor is at large.
If you continued with an at-large mayor, you would have 4 districts in that.
That's on. Not everybody, based on some of this correspondence, understands that.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. First is Neil Herrick, John Stein, and Connie Copps. Mr. Herrick.
Mr. Mayor, Council, City staff. Real quick, we're at this point, we're going to have to accept this plan whether we want it or not. So I say we move forward on it. Mr. Coomer, you had expressed some concerns at the last meeting, public perception of gerrymandering. I wanted to get back to you. That's not coming from us to the city council members. The concern was down the road, outside interests, that kind of thing. So I wanted to get back and let you know there isn't a public concern. You're going to divide this for your own political moments. I want to thank everyone on staff for trying. I know this is going to be a long process. It's not going to be easy. I want to thank council for not having me follow Mr. Winty right away. That's a lot like following Elvis on American Idol. Mr. Winty, I do appreciate your being here constantly. I wasn't sure, Mr. Winty had brought up precincts, and I don't know how many people are aware of those. I am a precinct captain down Holmes and Concannon, Winty Park, that area. So it may be something we want to either individually or as a town kind of reaffirm so people know what precincts are if this is part of what we're going to discuss. I think you guys will do a good job. I'm not worried. It's not anything I've got a big concern about. Staff will take care of it. We will have people from outside overseeing us, so this isn't something that any of us need to be deeply worried about. But I do appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort. You all of you here tonight have a tough job. I went to Congressman Swalwell's City Hall Town Council meeting. You guys have got 10 times the job he does. Don't tell him that, but you do. You deal with us one-on-one. You see us at the grocery store. You see us at the mall. You see us, he's gone all the time. So hang in there, do the best you can. We have faith in you, and thank you.
He's also got more staff, but thank you.
Well, that's a plus.
Yeah. Okay, John Stein, Connie Copps, Asa Strout.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. At the meeting, I think it was 3 meetings ago, I suggested that we're a homogeneous group of people. What I actually meant to say is that the ethnic and racial background is fairly homogeneous over the city. Not that individuals we're homogeneous as individuals, and it would be difficult to find a compact, connected district that will have a majority of any single ethnic or racial group. There are some other ways of grouping, though. One community of interest seems to be the people north of I-580, both around the college and what used to be Springtown and further to the east. The downtown will be difficult. We could use the area that was formerly the redevelopment agency, but it's far too small to be 1/4 of the city's population, so something would have to be added. In the same way, there's the South Livermore plan, which is a sort of a newer community of interest and a fairly high economic group, which might make a community of interest. The other thing is there are other ethnic and racial groups, like I think the second biggest is Southeast Asian. Obviously Caucasian is the biggest, but if you're looking for ethnicity, I think Southeast Asian would be the other one. But again, I think it's going to be an interesting and probably futile process to find something that everyone can agree on. And I'm not sure you can even get a majority to agree on anything, but good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Connie Copps, Asa Strout, Carl Wente.
So I'm telling you guys, write that attorney back and tell him this is America. We live in America. I live in Springtown, which is part of America. I have a lot of friends of all different colors and cultures and educational backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. This is indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Every single council member and every single person in city staff should be thinking about the whole Livermore. I live in Springtown, and Springtown is alienated. It's alienated. We don't need one person. We don't need to separate us more. This is America. Now, I was walking around the block the other night with my Iranian friend, and he could not believe that this lady was out in her yard in a bikini. He said, we should call city council. This should be illegal. That is too sexy. So I can understand it. But he lives in America. You know, this is wrong. You write him back and say, this is Livermore. Anyone can live here. Come here. We welcome all. This is wrong. And I can't see that this is even on the agenda. This is so wrong. Now, 2 months ago, I wrote to LAFCO asking about what was the annexation agreement when Springtown came to be. I have not heard back. I mean, a little something in an email, but I have not heard back anything substantial. It looks like parcels with 99A, they have record up. There's no record of my neighborhood being annexed. I'm ticked off. I really respect all different religions, all different cultures. Again, that area over there has the Hindu temple. You know what? I do not want to be all covered up. You know, I don't really feel like laying out my bikini at this stage of the game in my life, but I should be able to if I want to. This is America. You write him back and say, we're not doing it. And if you do separate Springtown as a whole, you know what? I don't know. That to me seems so unconstitutional because you know what? When the city was dealing with Springtown, they were dealing with a president of our HOA who, our HOA team that was not looking out after the community. They were having tons of meeting with Public Works, not communicating to us. It's wrong. Figure it out. This is America.
Thank you, Ms. Copps. Asa Strout, Carl Wente, and Tom Eisenberg.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. Looking forward to the next couple of meetings on the maps route. That being said, the only things that I actually had wanted to cover was specifically about the maps being created. You know, I work at a tech company, so I'm really interested in the data that's powering this stuff. And I understand that the software is, you know, it's a private, you know, it's their software. We can't share the details too much. But if we can make as much as the data that's used to power it open and, you know, transparent so that people can know this is the inputs that they used and this is the outcomes that we have. So we kind of know that, you know, for the sake of transparency, that we have an idea of, you know, exactly how it's being, you know, the sausage is being made without actually seeing it, for example. So if we can share the data inputs, some of the other stuff was like, you know, the weights used for each variable to draw the districts out. And then the methodology behind it all, just kind of documented and posted online so we can kind of easily see and understand the methodology that is being used for each of the districts. And then I don't know what kind of details on the actual maps themselves when they are released, but I would actually love to see, you know, the actual demographic breakdown, the socioeconomic breakdown of each district, so then the public can say, like, you know, this is what's in each district, so we get kind of an idea of, you know, the character and, you know, the aspects of Livermore that are kind of represented in each district. And so that's really all that I had in terms of that. So just to kind of echo, you know, the more information shared to the public, the better. I think it'll make it an easier process to go forward with when the public is informed as much as possible. Thank you.
And for the record, council members, with the maps that are created, whether they're, again, my maps or the maps created by the public, we will release both static PDFs so people can kind of see those. We'll publish those using a Google tool so people can actually zoom in to their street level if they want to. We will publish that demographic information as made available by the Census Bureau. In addition, after today's council meeting, working with staff, we'll publish some tools that allow members of the public to draw their own maps that include those underlining demographics. So if members of the public want to do those and do kind of what was just described, those are all tools that will be made available to the public subsequent to this meeting.
Thank you. Carl Wente, Tom Eisenberg.
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, thank you all for what you do. I will stay on topic, but I forgot to say thank you for those in uniform that serve and what you do. Mr. Chief, thank you for what you do. When we're up at the last one, it's just do this well, right? Do this as well as you can and as open as you can for transparency. Asa, I appreciate what you said. Like, you know, there are people that are going to go through all of this and look at it, providing as much openness to all of the information we have, all of the demographic information we have, all of the socioeconomics we have, to just do this well. Do I think this should be happening right now? No. The ship sailed. It's happening, right? Would we rather do it on more current census data? Absolutely. The ship's sailing. We got to control our own destiny here. Do this well. And you know what? I got a lot of faith that you will, because y'all up there got a lot of faith. I complimented you, Mr. Carling, earlier. Mr. Mayor, I think you're doing a good job, right? It's a thankless job at times, and I wonder why you would do it. But you're doing a good job, right? And it's leadership, and it's being out there, and it's building community and building bridges. Mr. Warner, your leadership as well of how you're making this city a better place, progressing, getting things done. You guys are doing a good job, and I thank you for that. This is as important as anything. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Connie Cops, this is America. Amen. The rule of law, like, what can we do? Like, we can fight this. The fighters have lost this. Let's control our own destiny. It's coming anyway. So this is America. We should celebrate it. The best place, best form of government in the world, and this is it at work. So it's coming. Do it well, and I trust that you will, because I got faith in all y'all. Thank you. And I got faith in the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Tom Eisenberg. Tough act to follow.
Thank you for the time. I'm Tom Eisenberg, South San Jose. Moved to Livermore 20 years ago in the south part off Arroyo. When I saw this first in the newspaper, I thought, okay, I've got a race-related lawyer who's going to make money by suing towns that don't districtize themselves by race. I've heard tonight, as I did last week, that that is not our intent. In which case I make a recommendation to the mayor and the council and the staff. Yes, Livermore has an election district. It is the boundaries of the city of Livermore, California. Good day.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenberg. Okay, then I'm going to bring it back to the council, close the public hearing. Comments from the council, questions, comments?
Just a quick comment, I'm going to be short because I'm still, it's like we're at intermission. And we've gone a little bit here, and I'm just waiting for something substantive to come of this. And we'll have to come up and get some ideas about where it's going to go. But as for me, I'm real challenged by trying to find ways to divide us. And I think that's the part I hate the most. I don't like being divided, and I don't like this effort. We know it's going to happen, and I'm sure we're quite capable of doing it. But I think I don't see where there's a gain for anybody here. I just don't. Within our demographics, I don't know that there is anything that we can say we're going to change this or that or update it. It seems like some law firm in Orange County is making a lot of money off of a lot of people, and I'm not sure accomplishing anything at our level. So I'm just waiting to hear. I think our contract people here that are helping us figure this out. Because honestly, it's really difficult to find a way when I'm trying to look at it. Drive through our neighborhoods and see what's around. I'm thinking of my own neighborhood and to go door by door by door by door and try and figure out how we separate these people into little groups that they may represent. You know, I don't know how we do that because we're all pretty. Well, I can say some always say I'm already mixed up, but I mean we're all pretty mixed up around town. We're all pretty well. Distributed, I would say. So I'm just kind of hanging on to my seat here, and well, I always do. But it's just I want to see something. You know, when we start getting into actually drawing the districts and getting some reasoning together. And I'm trying to get some reasons, and quite honestly, it's really difficult to come up with any.
Comments, Mr. Carling?
So, Mr. Hageman, what do you need from us tonight? Or what would help, I guess?
The two pieces would be if there are any particular criteria that you want me to focus on in drawing the maps. So of those things we talked about, whether having compact maps are more important, having maps that are as close to equal in population is most important, those kinds of decisions would be A. And B, if there are any particular communities of interest that are important to be kept whole, or any places that somebody could argue there's a community of interest that you could say, you know what, it actually doesn't matter. So the example of the latter would be your downtown. Lots of cities consider downtowns to be a community of interest, but often they just say it's a community of interest, but it's a community of interest that actually is better divided up into multiple districts. That's not arguing that point. It could be, you could argue either point, but those are the kinds of things that would be the type of direction that would make sure that it's your council providing direction and it's not staff just drawing lines arbitrarily.
Yeah, so I don't. It'd be interesting to see what my colleagues say. I'm not sure that I can identify many communities of interest. Maybe I'm naive. I would say, off the top of my head, it seems to me like north of 580 is likely to be one, but on the other hand, I've heard people representing Springtown that would just as soon be included, not be separate, because I think from Ms. Kopp's point of view, they've often been separated in the past. So if there's a way we could make them feel part of a district that's also south of 580, that could well be important. But I'm a bit ambivalent about that because I don't live there. So I'm only going on what I've heard from the community. And the second is the point I made around Maryland Avenue School, but I think that's likely to be, the drawings that I've seen so far, and admittedly there are just notions, right, that people have submitted. I think they're likely to be included in a district anyway because of its location. So I don't know. I'd be interested in knowing what some of my colleagues think about what other communities of interest there might be. We did get some emails today that I I think Vice Mayor was referring to that because it was sort of 5 districts when it really is only 4, but.
So
And,
Go
and
ahead.
one thing I do generally ask of a council is, in providing direction at this phase, is whatever direction you may provide, and then include in that looking at the public testimony and where it's not contradictory to any other council direction, to consider that and give that weight. So if there's so in the example you gave where they're saying, like, here's some places to look, I would look at those places where the public is identified, again, where it's not counter to any specific direction given to council. from
Yeah, and I
council.
think those plans that we saw that were sort of notional are pretty close in terms of population, right? They're all about 20K, thereabouts?
There were, I believe you're referring to, there are 3 maps from one gentleman that were adding up. I believe there might have been some arithmetic issues in
Oh, okay.
those maps, so they weren't exactly balanced. But they were, several of the districts were balanced. So again, you know, that would be the work I would do. And all of those maps that were previously submitted would be digitized and presented to you, so you'll be able to see which ones were and weren't
Okay.
balanced.
I appreciate that, thanks.
Vice Mayor Warner?
Yeah, a couple of comments, sort of building on what I've heard. First of all, I think I get the impression that a lot of people are still kind of in shock and haven't kind of engaged on that we need to do this, and has been pointed out to do it well. So I think it's still going to take time for people to realize we have to do this. But right now, there's a lot of people who are saying they wish it weren't, and that process has to play out. The observation I have is that we're just beginning now to get people to engage from the community, and I was wondering, is there more we can do to get more people to do that? And I personally, I would, before opining on what I think ought to happen, I'd like to hear what people think. And so far, many of what a lot of it is what not to do. And that's not necessarily overly helpful. And I would say we've only, as far as I know, only heard from one person from Springtown. So I don't think I would then draw the conclusion that that represents Springtown. So somehow, I don't know how, but my suggestion is we've got to figure out a way to get more engagement on this. And any thoughts?
Well, I will defer to your city staff as far as and your interactions with your city staff as far as any additional outreach you may want to do. I will tell you, based on my prior experience with other jurisdictions, what you're struggling with now is it is a common challenge in cities when you're dealing with something abstract. Because right now it's compactness as just an idea, right? When you have actual maps coming from me, coming from members of the public that are published online, that is often a very effective way to encourage engagement from members of your public. I will warn you that engagement will often be negative because I will do something wrong for lack of knowing that I drew a line in a place where I shouldn't have. But that will be a trigger for them coming back and saying, hey, that really line should be over there, that school should be with that district, whatever that is.
So if I could you put the timeline back up? Because I think that's what we're trying to get at. Is because I also feel like what Councilmember Carling said, what do you want from me and when? And right, and I'm looking at the timeline, and I know you've got September 28th for revised maps published, and we've got public hearing number 3 on September 10th, and I don't know how you're actually going to get good stuff from us. If it's not clear.
So the August 31st date that is listed is the deadline for preparing those materials. It's my intent to get those earlier because we do want to maximize the amount of time for the public to react. So that's a deadline that is driven in part by your newspaper publishing deadline. So it's kind of an absolute deadline in order to get that done. But the intent would be to get those up as quickly as possible.
So my other question is, and in other times and things like this, we've had the 2-2-1 kind of briefings, and do we intend to do that so we can offer thoughts in those on this?
I would anticipate that the briefings you're referring to are called to wolf briefings. Those are generally one-way conversations between staff advising council what's happening within the city. We're not seeking direction at that point or trying to reach a consensus. So that would not be an effective tool for this exercise. The effective tool is what we're doing today, talking to you collectively, receiving that input to provide it to Mr. Hageman so that he can prepare the district maps.
So, well, maybe what I was thinking is we're going to publish these draft maps, and it's one thing for us to individually kind of stare at them, but is there a way to have your thinking behind those maps or what they represent? Or, I mean, how are we going to understand the map other than just kind of staring at it?
Correct. So I think what Mr. Hageman is proposing is to receive input from you, take input that you've received from the public that is consistent with your direction, and develop some test maps. You'll be presented some examples to consider that will provide something more concrete for the community to then evaluate and then provide their input whether they like it or don't like it and articulate the reasons why, one way or the other. That's part of how this process has been established and is intended to proceed. So you'll have your first maps published roughly around August 31st for your meeting on September 10th. So the public will have a chance to...
So what I was asking is not just the map, but the reasons for that map, or what's the assumptions, or what is it? What does the map represent?
And so that's what Mr. Hageman also articulated. He'll provide that demographic data as far as what is in these particular districts to help them have their own identity, or one of the provisions that you could give direction on, which is we are, as one individual said at the lectern, of homogeneous community. We are equally diverse throughout our community, and if that's one of the goals for the City Council, which is focused more expressly on just set the demographics so they're equal as far as population, and separate the city into 4 quadrants, just draw a T and do it that way. That's direction that Mr. Hageman could then implement and show what that results in, what that demographic looks like as far as your data, your makeup, your population, and see whether that meets your needs.
Yeah, okay. So as long as the map comes along with the assumptions and objectives of that map, so that we can understand why that map is. That's what I'm asking for. The one, if I may, the one input that I would, my thing just blanked here. You were talking on the report. It talks to the City Council may consider other criteria and other criteria. And the one that kind of struck me is one I wouldn't necessarily go for was this avoiding head-to-head contests between incumbent and council members insofar as this does not conflict with the federal or state law. I mean, I personally don't think that this thing is about us in any way, and that this should be what's the best thing to do. That's where I'm coming from.
So to your 2 points, Councilmember A, to add on this question about objectives, one of the things when I would present the maps at the next council meeting I would do is I would walk you through the logic of this is how this map came to be. This is why you are seeing this and that and the other things. So an example from another jurisdiction I'm working with is there was a large discussion on that council about whether to use the freeway as a dividing line. And so I walked them through that this map was one treating the freeway as a hard dividing line, and this map was used saying, don't worry about the freeway. So that will be part of the presentation at the next meeting. I'm happy to work with staff to figure out anything that's appropriate for purposes of the staff report that would accompany those maps for purposes of public publication prior to the next meeting to figure out how best to present that information. As far as incumbency, that is something, and the effects on those on the dais, that is something that, absent council direction, I would not consider as a factor. What we typically do, which if the council does not want to do, we can, is we typically will produce a report that just says, here is the census geography where each of the council members lives, and we'll include that in the information that was previously discussed that would be provided to members of the public if they wanted to produce their own maps, because if this council didn't want to consider that, a member of the public may want to, and you don't want to be necessarily accused of playing hide the ball. So that is something that we would produce. It's not something I would consider other than for the purposes of producing. If you are concerned about that and the direction is not to produce that document, then we won't produce that document.
I'm okay with, with all information being out there. I was just, the more was the suggestion to my fellow council members. I'm putting myself out there saying, I don't think it's a factor that we should consider. I don't know what the rest think, but personally, I don't think this is about us.
I would agree. So can you just give us a sense of sort of circa how many you think you're going to have on the 31st? Are we going to get 50? Or are we going to get 5? Or what?
The commitment is always to produce at least 3 maps. We
Okay.
found that is
Okay.
enough to at least allow people to react things. Sometimes I will produce more because I'll find that there's more trade-offs involved, and rather than artificially not allowing you to see those, I will produce additional maps, but the commitment is minimally 3 maps.
Okay, thanks. That helps a lot because I mean, for me anyway, until I see something, it's hard for me to think about communities of interest and so on and so forth. So I appreciate the fact that you're going to provide at least 3 to us. And I agree with my colleague over there. I don't think you should, I mean, I appreciate the information that you're going to provide as to where we live, but I don't think that's what we're up here to consider.
In fact, just to give us a starting point, First Street and Livermore Avenue being dividers all the way around. There's some quadrants right there, and we can take it from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I read through the staff report. I think a lot of the points in there make a lot of sense. The precincts, the slices don't match the precincts, so I think that keeping those precincts together, keeping the neighborhoods together. There's been a lot of discussion about the protected classes. And another thing, just to throw a wrinkle about how it is more complicated, I actually went through and looked at a lot of the individual precincts. And there was some discussion in the previous meetings about the impact that those precincts and those communities had. But some precincts have a voter turnout of 30%. There are other precincts that have a voter turnout of 60%. So that may also figure into how much a neighborhood is energized to get out. And up until recently, now 75% of the people are voting by mail. Well, previously, we didn't have that much of an option. And so now you can get more people to get out and vote because they don't actually have to go out on that day, because some people are commuting 4 or 5 hours a day and can't get to a polling place. So just another wrinkle into the whole thing. I think that the criteria you've outlined are good. One of the things that I am very concerned about, and I think we've all broached this before, is one of the letters that we received said this district should therefore have its own priorities represented on the city council. And what concerns me is that means you're going to have every single district is going to be looking after its own priorities rather than what are the priorities of the community. And it goes back to the Edmund Burke quote that when you sit at this council, you're not a representative of a neighborhood, you're a representative of the city, and you're looking after the whole city. So that's those are some of the concerns. And just to echo what the Vice Mayor suggested last time, as we go through our goal setting, to make sure that we include a module on how we are responsible for the entire city. So with that, this is just provide direction. Do you have sufficient directions? Anyone wish to provide any additional comments?
So I just want to verify in summarizing this properly. Consider traditional redistricting criteria. Do not consider incumbency as a factor. Consider precinct boundaries where those would not result in a division of a census geography. Consider public testimony, particularly as relates to communities of interest. And there were a handful of communities that were identified by council, or potential boundaries that were identified by council. Is that an accurate summary of the direction? To produce at least less than 3 maps.
Okay. And we'll get a couple dozen maps and we can go through those at our leisure, right? Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your input.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And again, I want to encourage everybody in the community, everybody that's watching tonight, this is your opportunity. We want to do this well. And as we've said before, this isn't something that we want to do. This comes down to somebody exploiting a loophole in the wall to make money, and we want to make sure that we have control over this and that we do it well. So we certainly welcome all the comments from the community. This is your chance. So thank you very much. And with that, we go to 6.01. This is the Public Nuisance Prevention and Abatement. Thank you all.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'll be presenting the staff report this evening and the staff report that's before you. By way of introduction, I'm your city attorney, Jason Alcala. The direction from council in April was to identify tools for the city council's consideration to address public nuisances downtown. When this report was requested, I also advised the council that the city attorney's office and the neighborhood preservation division have been already working on updates to Livermore Municipal Code Chapter 8.14. That's your existing public nuisance ordinance. So following your direction, I coordinated with Police Chief Harris as well as Paul Spence in Community Development to identify some tools to recommend to you this evening. By way of overview, this evening I will basically touch on your authority to declare certain conditions or activities to be public nuisances as a legislative act. I'll then review the proposed amendments in Chapter 8.14, your Neighborhood Nuisance Abatement Ordinance. And then I'll seek your direction on 3 potential tools that we've identified that could aid with the abatement of public nuisances downtown. One of which being an entertainment district, which would actually be composed of 2 types of regulations, one being a land use and the second being a business operational regulatory ordinance. Another item could be a graffiti ordinance that allows for a summary abatement, and I'll explain what that is in a few moments. And again, thirdly, an aggressive panhandling ordinance. And I will talk about and provide some information on the challenges that are associated with that type of ordinance and what the most recent reaction has been from the courts relative to an ordinance adopted by the city of Sacramento. Now with that, a public nuisance is an activity or condition that interferes with another's person's comfortable use or enjoyment of their property. And there's 2 types of nuisances. One can be a public nuisance and one can be a private. A private nuisance, you can think of it, there's 2 neighbors and someone's doing something that just irritates their direct neighbor. That's a private, it only affects one individual. A public nuisance, and in contrast, affects the rights of an entire community. The city, by operation of law, has the police power to declare a particular condition or activity to be a public nuisance. Your current ordinance 8.14 provides such examples: overgrown weeds, accumulation of trash, abandoned appliances, disabled vehicles are visible from the public right-of-way. Those have been previously declared by the city council to be public nuisances. So that's how you've exercised this authority in the past. There are other public nuisances that are established by state statute, dangerous buildings being one of them in your building code. In addition, as a city council, you can declare it to be a public nuisance to engage in a particular activity if you require a permit for that activity and that particular user doesn't have that. And that's how we get into our entertainment district. I'll explain more in a moment about that. To begin, Chapter 8.14 is your Neighborhood Nuisance Abatement Ordinance. That's the primary tool utilized by your Neighborhood Preservation Division to respond to community complaints about its appearance and items such as overgrown weeds, trash, and how they respond. The ordinance, however, is a tool of last resort. Initially, if a complaint comes into the Neighborhood Preservation Division, they'll engage in a letter writing campaign. Their first attempt administratively is to obtain voluntary compliance. If someone has some weeds, clean them up. If that is unsuccessful, they then go to another tool we already have in our code, which is to issue an administrative citation. That's a fine, it's a ticket at that point, trying to impress upon an individual the need to correct their behavior and bring their property into compliance. Failing that, we then move to the Nuisance Abatement Ordinance. That's a process whereby the Neighborhood Preservation Division presents its evidence, its complaint, the conditions of a particular property, to an administrative hearing officer. This is an unbiased third-party officer who then weighs the information, very much like a court. At the end of that exercise, they issue an order and a determination. First, it's actually a determination, then the order. Determination whether, in fact, a public nuisance exists, then an order to abate. That's what's set forth in your ordinance right now. What we also have after that process is, rather than going forward and abating it and actually being able to respond and remove that particular nuisance and that problem, our ordinance through time has adopted a secondary appeal process. which will then send it back through the administrative process out after the hearing, back to the city manager to then review the administrative hearing impartial decision, and that can be then be appealed back to you as a city council. That's redundant, it's unnecessary, and it's inefficient. That's one place that the Neighborhood Preservation Department has found itself stymied in the past. They'll proceed through the administrative hearing and then get an order from an administrative hearing judge, and then have to go back through our processes once again. That was a creature of oversight. That wasn't the intention, but through time and amendments, that's what's occurred to us. Our office has sat down with Neighborhood Preservation Division to figure out how to streamline this, and what you have before you today is an ordinance to, 1, clarify the regulations they enforce today. 2, expand the scope of this ordinance to address all types of public nuisances, not just property nuisances. And 3, to make a more refined and efficient process for them to be able to address the public nuisance in a timely manner. That allow them to get to resolution as opposed to being bogged down in an administrative procedure that doesn't add anything but time to the process. So for this one item today, we'll be seeking an action from the City Council to introduce this ordinance if it meets with your pleasure, in which case it will be then returned for a second meeting for adoption and then become effective. The other items we have on your desk before you today are other tools that could help enforcement downtown. Primary among those is a downtown entertainment district. Again, that's focused on businesses serving alcohol to address the negative secondary effects. As we coordinated between our office, the Community Development Department, and the Police Department, we did observe that certain alcohol establishments downtown were resulting in negative secondary effects to its neighbors. We were seeing situations such as excessive calls for police service. We were seeing ineffective security plans. We were seeing negative effects such as public urination, vomit, fights as a result of these. The regulations we're proposing, or actually seeking direction if we want us to go away, develop, and return to you, would be land use conditions which require a conditional use permit for those type of businesses. Conditional use permit is an opportunity to address uses that are adjacent to each other or nearby that might not necessarily be compatible. And the conditions on there are ways to make those two businesses compatible. Business regulations focus on the operations. Those are trying to regulate preventing opportunities to prevent disorderly conduct, regulate the hours of operation, regulate the manner in which a alcohol serving establishment disperses at closing time, how they handle intoxicated patrons, security plans, how they can institute measures to avoid excessive calls for service. Examples of how this land use and business regulations go hand in hand in the city of Livermore, your adult business ordinance does that. You need both the land use entitlement for that, as well as you have business operation requirements. Other examples are your card rooms, your massage establishments, and bingo. Generally, those type of businesses that could cause community harm if not operated properly. This is not a new concept. The city has evaluated this and pursued it previously in conjunction with LDI. They reviewed a proposal from the Responsible Hospitality Institute, how to make sure you have a vibrant downtown that invites people to come together, share food, share drink in a responsible manner. If the council gives us direction to pursue this, we would coordinate a staff with LDI to work with them to just adopt regulations or propose regulations back to you for adoption to address the negative secondary effects that they're experiencing as well, and to see if we can develop some regulations to make the uses more compatible downtown. With regard to land use regulations downtown, the alcohol serving establishments don't currently require a conditional use permit. That raises a particular issue of what we call legal non-conforming use. Generally, they are allowed to use that is legal when established, has the opportunity to continue and operate as long as it doesn't expand and doesn't create new impacts if it remains in its current course. That doesn't mean you can't require them to have a conditional use permit. That's just a secondary factor we need to evaluate, which is to give them the opportunity to amortize their investment in their particular business before they have to comply with the conditional use permit. So again, if you gave us that direction, that would be one of the items that we would analyze. So what we're seeking on this particular item today is direction whether to develop a comprehensive regulatory scheme with both business and land use regulations for alcohol serving businesses downtown. If in particular there are specific behaviors you'd like us to focus on. If you give us that direction, we will coordinate with LDI. And we will evaluate the potential amortization if we are to recommending a change in the land use designations. Another tool before you this evening is a graffiti ordinance. And this is a graffiti ordinance for summary abatement. I mentioned previously what we have for our nuisance abatement process, which we have an administrative hearing officer. The government code allows the city to adopt an ordinance for summary abatement. Now, what does that mean? That means the city receives a complaint that there's graffiti in a location, say somewhere downtown. The staff can respond, give notice to the property owner that they need to remove that graffiti, and if they don't within a period of time, generally 10 days, the city can then take it upon itself to remove that graffiti, because it's a nuisance per se and it can be removed at that point. And the city also has the opportunity to bill back that property owner for that cost removal if it doesn't do that. Now, that does create, in some people's minds, a certain amount of injustice because they didn't create that particular graffiti. If the police department or otherwise is able to identify who marked that property, the lien can be placed upon that individual's property. And if they're a minor, it can be liened against their parents' property. So there is an outlet, and that's something that can be recovered either at that time if we know that information, or if it's discovered within a reasonable amount of time thereafter. The process would be similar to what you see annually with your weed abatement procedures, which is LPFD will give a notice to people who have overgrown weeds, and it's a fire hazard. They have the opportunity to correct that condition themselves. If they don't, LPFD goes out and corrects it for them and returns to you after that with a lien to be placed upon their tax records. Most people comply. Those who don't, it shows up on their tax bill. So that's what's provided in the government code for a summary abatement. It doesn't necessarily need to be limited to downtown. It can be throughout the community. But again, we'll be seeking direction from you. The staff report includes examples of ordinances adopted by the cities of Walnut Creek and Tracy, and they have had a fair deal of success in implementing those. The final tool before you is what we identified as far as staff is we've seen concern expressed by the community about aggressive panhandling downtown. People coming up and pursuing them. Some situations we've seen or heard about where an individual has blocked someone's vehicle or pursued them and will grab an elbow. Aggressive panhandling ordinances are opportunities for the city to respond to that, but I would urge caution. The city of Sacramento adopted an ordinance last November that dealt with panhandling in 3 different aspects. One was panhandling from center medians in the roadway, was regulating aggressive panhandling, those who are pursuing and not disengaging someone who had already said, I don't want to provide any money to you. And 3, trying to regulate that conversation with people who are in captive audiences. A captive audience was defined as people who are engaged in outdoor dining, waiting in a line to see a performance, in our case, either at the movie theater, say LV Pack, or waiting to get into a restaurant or a bar establishment, or sitting before an ATM. In that case, the U.S. District Court took the case very quickly and overturned the ordinance this past July. They found that there was an inappropriate infringement on the exercise of free speech. I did speak with the city attorney for the city of Sacramento, because my analysis of the law so far does provide an opportunity to regulate aggressive panhandling and the regulation of panhandling from center medians. The regulation of panhandling or soliciting money from people in a captive audience, that's been an uncomfortable area of law in the past, and those regulations who have gone there have lost in the past. So it was rather surprising that Sacramento went there. Their city attorney expressed frustration as well. However, she was granted the leave to return to the court to see if they can, again, regulate aggressive panhandling and people solicit donations and panhandling from the roadway medians. What I'm requesting today and what staff's requesting on this particular item is if this is something you'd like us to pursue, we would go away, research this, and see what the current state of the law is, and return to you with proposed regulations that would comply with the law as best as we know at that time. And to the extent possible, focus on the negative secondary effects or the behavior itself. Try and divorce the regulation from the First Amendment aspect and focus on if anybody is in the roadway prohibiting or barring a car from backing out of a parking space, that should be a prohibited activity regardless of whether it's soliciting donations. That activity shouldn't occur. So we would propose to approach it from that perspective as opposed to focusing on the First Amendment perspective. So in conclusion, what we're seeking today is that you introduce an ordinance to amend Chapter 8.14 of our municipal code based upon the changes that have been identified by the City Attorney's Office in coordination with the Neighborhood Preservation Division. and then provide direction on the three tools before you, one of which being entertainment district with both land use and business regulations, the second being a graffiti ordinance for summary abatement, and the third being aggressive panhandling. This is a complicated matter. I've thrown a lot of words at you, and you have a dense staff report. My recommendation would be that we're available for questions. We can answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I would request that you do receive public input. And when it returns to the City Council, if you'd like me to, I can walk you through these steps, each item in turn, and you can act on them in turn, if that meets your needs. And with that, staff's available for questions.
Questions?
Down here.
Councilmember Coomber?
Yeah. Conditional use permits would create a new cost for downtown businesses, correct? We'd have a new.
That is
so
correct.
we'd have a kind of a business unfriendly thing. And I understand absolutely from the law enforcement point of view. This applies to so many parts of this and the proposal is the aggressive panhandling is what's the, why aren't we considering a stricter interpretation of the penal code for some of these sections? 415, in fact, for, you know, if somebody's disturbing the peace by not letting you back your car out of there, does that qualify? Now, I will also confess that I don't think there's probably been a 415 prosecution in Alameda County for 25 years, but you know, there are tools out there. Would we have better tools and more enforceable tools if they were to be in a city ordinance? I think that's a fair one, because otherwise I can think of, you know, 647F. I mean, anybody who's ever worn a uniform knows drunk in public, and I imagine some of those are, I'm sure the chief can speak to this, that those come up every now and then. If we use the tools that are already available to us, is that sufficient, or I guess I'm not having a real easy time seeing what the creation of an extra burden on businesses downtown might have.
Certainly. So with regard to the businesses, let me see if I can unpack this slightly.
Yeah.
What the police department, if the chief were to take the mic, would inform you is certain businesses downtown have resulted in what is believed to be an extraordinary number of calls for service that are indicative of operational means and norms that aren't effective. And that we're subsidizing that as a city right now by bringing our police force in there to respond to this. People are just being pushed out into the street in an inebriated state and causing disruptions and disorderly conduct. We don't have an effective mechanism other than police enforcement, but that creates a very difficult dynamic because the police department, as they respond, are already faced with an aggressive situation, and that then snowballs. So you have an officer who then may be faced with using force, and that could result in a claim against the city, where if somebody were to maintain their operation reasonably, deal with an intoxicated individual, get them out of their facility and home and out of the public in a reasonable manner, could avoid that point of contact. Now, with regard to conditional use permit and the cost that you raised, which is the land use component, that is something to be considered, and there's some trade-offs that the city can evaluate as well, which is if there's a cost associated with that and you're amortizing their investment in a particular piece of property, there may be an opportunity to forego that cost for the conditional use permit application if they were to accelerate their amortization process. So there's things that can be done. But you're right, there generally is a cost associated with filing a conditional use permit application.
The city has in the past, on certain permits, to encourage actually use of that permit, subsidized that actual permit. So, for example, in the downtown area, the city does not charge for design review of signs, even though there's obviously a cost of doing that. And that's actually to encourage compliance, and so that there is not a barrier, a cost barrier to compliance. So the choice of tool is one choice the council has. The choice of recovery essentially on that tool is a separate action, and so don't let one get in the way of the other on that one. You can deal with those things independently if you wish.
Yeah, so thanks very much. I'm all for clarity and amending the municipal code, but I did have a couple of questions about it. You talked about eliminating an unnecessary step. How many times now do we go through this process? I mean, is this burdensome, horribly burdensome to the city staff now and to our city manager?
It's not horribly burdensome, but what we have is by the time a particular action reaches the stage of actually going to administrative hearing, as I discussed, you've already exhausted a lengthy process of letter writing, a letter writing campaign trying to obtain voluntary compliance. You've already exhausted your citation process, issuing citations, trying to get people to pay attention to resolve this. At this point, you've already gone through an administrative hearing officer. You've had an opportunity where each side can present evidence to an impartial third party to give an order. One, does this condition exist? And two, should it be abated? So at that point, the law allows you to proceed to abate that. If the council wanted to continue to have a tertiary review process to go through, that could be done, but then that again extends out that review process. And so far, the handful of times, I think there's currently 5, I'm not sure if we have anybody from neighbor preservation, we have 5 to 7 cases that are currently pending that have exhausted that. We have what they believe, and the colloquial term would be a slumlord or absentee landlord is not responding. So they're faced with now going through an additional process through the city manager, coming back to the city council, and then having to go forward and get additional costs, if necessary, from the court if they appeal that decision.
So on an annual basis, how many times do we have these kind of nuisance things come up that you have to go through that process? Is it a lot?
No, it's not a lot.
Okay.
But it just drives.
Chief, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's not the number of times. It's the frustration with each individual time, and you typically it's an entire neighborhood or someone that is sort of being victimized by one particular house, and all the effort that goes into rectifying it, and it just takes forever, and it's beyond what is actually even required by the law, our current ordinance, and so people are really frustrated. It just takes a long time to get it, and it doesn't have to be that way. We could solve the issue sooner.
Okay, well, that helps a lot. The other question I had is, who decides who the hearing officer is? How is that determined?
So the law does provide certain guidance in that it cannot be a city employee, it cannot be someone who's beholden to the city. There's a network that is established and we're looking to expand throughout the Bay Area, where an attorney or code enforcement officer for another jurisdiction makes themselves available to hear the particular item, but it's somebody who's not associated with the city.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, I was in my former life, when I was represented the city in Ventura County, I was administrative hearing officer, say, for the hearings that came forward from the cities of Simi Valley or the city of Ventura, because I didn't represent them.
Okay. I have some other comments, but I'll wait until, do we have any blue cards? Not yet.
Do you have any no cards?
Okay. I'll let Vice Mayor.
We'll go down the line here. Vice Mayor Warner?
How many cards do we have?
None.
None. Okay.
I thought there were going to be some comments tonight.
So,
Mr. Seiler?
So you want to open the conversation on it and then go from there?
Sure. I got a couple of questions. Yeah. Anything? Okay.
I'll just wait.
Okay. Question on page 197. This is regarding the entertainment permits. Fighting loud noise and offensive words in public places. So how does one define offensive words? Because that's obviously in the ear of the beholder. And the reason I asked this question is specifically in relation to when we were talking about the aggressive panhandling, because we've heard people have been shouting, screaming offensive words, and other activities in the downtown where people are shouting at other folks. So is there any way that we can take this disturbing the peace component and expand that use? Because as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, the right for me to wave my fist stops at the tip of the other person's nose. And you need to respect where the limits are.
So the ordinance you're referring to, the attachment you're referring to, is an ordinance that we provided as an example, and this is from this particular ordinance is from the city of Davis. So we do have, Mark, how do we describe our noise ordinance downtown? The right to party?
Essentially a right to downtown operations, which notes that in the downtown area there are some very specific activities that you should expect in the downtown which are different than other neighborhoods within the community. So for that, noise, activities late into the evening, deliveries early in the morning are all protected, essentially items which are defined in the negative. They're defined as not being nuisances for part of our ordinance.
Correct. So we would have to reconcile if the direction was to adopt an ordinance or regulation. That particular one with regard to noise, we would have to reconcile with our existing regulations in our downtown specific plan.
Okay, because I said I'm just trying to take some of the regulations we have, and then how do we use those regulations to affect a change in behaviors from people that are shouting, yelling, using what many people would consider to be offensive language.
And that's, again, that starts to intrude back into that uncomfortable area of the First Amendment,
right?
Which we would have to be very judicious on how we approach that. But if that's the council's direction, we would explore that opportunity and see what we can do and bring it back to you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? So we'll take the public comment now. Oh, there he is, yeah. Okay, first up, Brent Seiler and Nancy Bankhead. Mr. Seiler.
Council, staff, I really appreciate you guys bringing this up. Chief, I know you've got a lot of hard work you've got to do down in that downtown area with your officers policing up. It was funny that this came up during this council meeting. I wish it was a little bit sooner so I could have went home, but there was a friend of mine owns a business down by the post office, and I've worked with her to help her find some cameras and made recommendations because their business continually gets vandalized, broken bottles, defecation, stuff like that. And there was something that just happened recently that got posted on social media. Eventually, I believe it got turned over to the police department to handle. But she's, for the last 2 years that I've known her, she's been battling this. And a lot of people go, well, it's the homeless, and it's not. It's the people coming out of the bars that are drunk, that are going and doing things. I mean, if you look at that little strip that we've got, I'm surprised we're not the richest city in Northern California for DUIs because there's, I think, more bars along that strip area than we have other establishments. But they come out of these things and they've got that liquid energy in them, and they feel that, you know, they can go and do whatever they want. And I really appreciate the city taking the time to try to address this. I know personally for me, walking down on a Saturday morning, especially now at Monica's to go have a breakfast, you walk past.
You actually got in?
Yes, that I did get in, and joked about it and had fun while everybody else complained. But you walk by the little trees that are planted, and there is a strong smell of urine where people are relieving themselves. You know, that's just the way it is. So beyond looking at this, and this may not be the appropriate time to do it or the appropriate ordinance, but if there was some way we could help incentivize the businesses to try to clean off the sidewalks, help keep the city in a little bit neater perspective so that when we do have special events that come into the town and people are walking down on a Saturday, they don't have that smell of urine, or they don't see feces on the ground or vomit or broken bottles. You know, we look like a respectable city. So if we could also figure out somewhere, sometime to look at that, that would be very helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. Nancy Bankhead.
Hi. I've been caught up in this, and I didn't like it at the time. I had graffiti to put on my buildings that, you know, were gotten rid of. And you know what? I'm happy I got rid of the graffiti. I talked to Celeste the other day about something that happened on the property. I like that the city of Livermore has some control of what's going on. I have a friend that lives downtown on McLeod and 2nd, and twice she's been woken up with somebody on her roof. The second time, the guy was drunk. And she's going, "What the hell are you doing up there?" And he goes, "I don't know." He lost his cell phone. It was a mess for the police. He came out of a bar. It shouldn't be that way in our little town. There's an article, I love telling this story. It was in the early 1900s. The police came to a house in Livermore, and the lady was so malaised with drink that she couldn't tell the sheriff why the man had no head sitting across the table from her. We don't want to keep that reputation going on. That's a true story. We need more control. I came off the freeway yesterday. I'd done it 100 times, and I looked over at the right, which I never do. I'm looking straight down trying to get home. And I looked at the fence along the freeway there that's next to Uncle, the post office. That fence is all graffitied. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, that's when you're coming into Livermore and you see graffiti there. I mean, most of us don't because we're looking to get home off the freeway, but it was, how long? Quarter of a mile? Yeah, it's a long thing. And Celeste is, I don't know how many people you have controlling that, but she's only one lady and she's fantastic. I mean, you've got great people working for you, but they need help. The police need help. We don't need the loud music downtown. It's an entertainment area, but people live there too. They need to be able to sleep in the houses. And a lot of the houses were built in the early 1900s and are not that well, you know, insulated and stuff. So anything you can help to keep our city nicer would be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Going to close the comment period, bring it back to the council. Let's see, comments first. Comments, questions? Councilmember, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for a fairly, very thorough report. When I initiated this last time, I wasn't thinking that you were going to come back this way, but I guess I should have known you would. So it's just really a good job. And I think that the thing that motivated me was, in particular, the downtown, and that we want to make sure that stays as a good quality there. So, and now the spectrum of things that you've given us here, this is my kind of take on it, on the comments, is one is, I think the easiest way for us to get into this and to make sure that we can help control what goes on downtown is the business regulations. My impression is that's the least effort and fairly impactful. Is that correct?
That's an opportunity to get immediate response, yes.
Right. And then, so I'm all for us crafting the good set there. I think the conditional use permit is something that we should carefully consider, but I think I would want to see it in more detail and understand its ramifications and what's the cost to the businesses. And I guess we can grandfather businesses in, and then should the new ones come in and everything. But I am concerned about the cost to the businesses, so I'm looking for a solution that's effective but is not too burdensome, let's say. But I do think that we should understand more of what a conditional use permit would be like and what it would be. With respect to graffiti, Ms. Bankhead's comments, I've called in that fence a few times and it's gotten fixed. But I do believe, you know, based on, I think, reading the book Tipping Point, and these things like graffiti, broken windows, et cetera, are very important in paying attention to, because it signals to the whole community that we care, the community cares. So it may seem like minor and not to do it, but I actually think it's very important. And so I'm horrified when I see it, the respect that people are paying to our community, and I think that as a community, we need to show that we care. So I do believe that something similar to the weed abatement, it makes sense. And then on the panhandling, I'm not sure. And I know there have been complaints, but I just don't know that we need to tackle that at this time. But I kind of understand it, but I don't know. So that's where I'm at on this.
Councilmember Carling?
Yeah, I mostly agree with Vice Mayor. I was concerned also about the CUP, the conditional use permit, and the cost to downtown businesses. I did have a discussion with city staff last week, and I was just a little surprised about how much it does cost. And in a conversation earlier today with city attorney, I learned that the business regulations were a much more immediate way to deal with some of the trouble that we've been seeing in some of the businesses. So I'm in favor of that. The graffiti thing, I guess we still would expect. It's a little like sidewalks to me. We're going to expect the owner to pay, and I think, if I understand it correctly, that if you've got a wall like I do that borders a street and somebody tags the wall on the other side, it's my responsibility to clean it up. Is that right? So I think we have to understand that there are plenty of homes that it's not just businesses, but it's homes, residences that people will be on the hook for to clean up if that happens. It's a little like the weed thing, although to the point made earlier, I suppose you could have some responsibility for the weeds growing, but you may not have any responsibility for the tag that somebody puts on you.
If I may, what's the current rule with respect to that?
It's the same, isn't it?
With regard to graffiti, right now it is it is declared to be a public nuisance in chapter 8.14 of your municipal code. I'm not aware of a situation where the city, as Councilmember Carling had advised, where the backing wall, that they had pursued that against a particular property owner. And that's something that we can return. If the council's direction is to evaluate those conditions of when we should pursue the property owner, and which would be basically a cost incurred by the city, we can return with that information.
Oh, I thought I
So the shift here, to be clear, is, I think we're losing it in the discussion, is right now when somebody tags a property owner's property, the property owner is responsible for remediating that. The change we're talking about here is allowing city staff, after notice, to go on to private property and actually deal with the graffiti. The two large examples we have for property owners are the federal government, and that's the fence we got testimony on earlier, which is essentially near the post office. The federal government generally doesn't ever respond. And they've sort of said that they would be willing to allow the city to take care of that issue if that's important to the city. The other is essentially the railroads, where, again, we can technically notify them that they need to deal with that. We don't have an instrument to deal with those issues. And recalcitrant property owners, which, after much notice, don't deal with a prominent area. We have not generally done things like walls or other things, which are pseudo. In some cases, almost all of our walls are still public property on those. But essentially, if they tagged a business, ultimately getting that tag removed is something we work with a business owner. The change would be to allow the city to actually remove that tag on private property.
And that's the first
Okay,
step.
but
The second step would be the actual leaning of the cost for that particular work.
Yeah.
What we have identified is those properties that are owned by the state or the federal government, we would not be able to seek compensation from them for that work, but we would still have the authority to go on there, and we would be in coordination with them. And so far, they seem receptive.
And again, there are two decisions. One is whether to allow the city to perform the work. The second is what your policy is on recovery. And those are separate from each other.
Okay, but I still don't, I guess thank you for your explanation, but I still am curious about a wall that backs up to a person's residence that faces a street. Suppose somebody tags that. Whose responsibility, irrespective of who cleans it up, who pays?
And the answer on essentially that the issue is right now what happens is those walls are deemed because in many cases they actually are on public property. The city has paid to essentially remove that tag. If we make this change, it would be up to you to give us direction on essentially whether to pursue recovery on walls that are clearly on private property. Most of our walls, as you know, are either on a blend of public and private property or sometimes on public property. So without actually transferring the title, those would remain that. And even if we decided to transfer title, you as a matter of policy could give direction on whether those items would be costs that the city would absorb.
Okay. Okay, enough about graffiti. Panhandling. It's interesting that Vice Mayor said he wasn't sure, because I'm not either. I was curious about the center medians. I mean, I guess maybe it's because of my traffic patterns or something, but I see people panhandling in center medians more than any of the other ones, pursuing individuals or at a captive audience. And I found that interesting because I've never had a problem. I mean, I see the people doing it, but they don't seem very aggressive.
So let's talk, there's two different types of medians. So the recommendation right now would be from center medians, which are on the city's public right-of-way, those landscape strips in between the lanes of traffic. Right. And there's another location, which is that center landscaping for a driveway, say, to a shopping center. This one right now, the recommendation would be focusing on those.
Sort of like at Orchard.
Yeah.
When you leave Orchard.
Yeah, so now we would focus on, propose to focus on or seek direction on those in the center of the street. But if you wanted us to explore those driveway paths, we could look at that as well. But again,
what are you suggesting, though, to make it illegal to do that, or what?
That's a question of whether you would like us to pursue that. It's an uphill battle, and the law is consistently shifting on us. So this one is, we have identified this as a concern. We received complaints about this. We're not sure that we're able to address it as a panhandling ordinance. Councilmember Coomer identified other tools that are available to us through the penal code. We're now exploring those options. But we want to present this to you. If this is something you want us to explore, we can bring back what we can, some areas what we can't do.
One of the issues there is not defining the panhandling activity, but defining essentially not having people in the landscape medians in the middle of traffic. And if you defined it that way, essentially as a public safety issue, which is we don't want people on medians and either driveways that are busy that lead to shopping centers or on streets, that would become a separate offense, separate from the panhandling and much more likely to be enforceable. Generally, that's the same reason we don't like signs in the medians, campaign signs. Essentially, when people go out in the middle of a busy street or busy driveway, good things don't happen. So we don't technically have something where standing on a median is technically against the law at the current time.
But you think we could?
Yes.
We would have an opportunity to focus on the behavior as opposed to the messaging. The city of Pleasanton is pursuing this now, and either they've considered an ordinance or they're preparing to consider an ordinance. With regard to aggressive panhandling, I think this, again, is an uphill battle. There are certain things we can do. If you want us to explore that, we can. If you're comfortable with the current state of regulations, we can table this for now and revisit at a future point in time.
Chief, how many times do we have? Let's take the median or outside Orchard, which is where I've seen.
Yeah, that's one of the locations also.
I mean, they could easily stand on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Safeway on First Street is another one, by Lowe's. There's a lot of different places around town. And like you said, it's the ones where they create a hazard or step out into traffic if someone is going to give them money.
Yeah.
It could create issues there. And the other aspect that we get called on a lot is when someone is pulling up to a parking lot and they're approached like in their car, and they feel threatened. Someone's asking them for something right there in their car, and it just doesn't feel safe for them, and so then the person will keep asking them over and over, and so they call the police, and so what crime has been committed? Nothing really, but if they're under certain circumstances that have to be very carefully crafted, you could have an ordinance that would protect against aggressive panhandling in certain locations and under certain aspects.
Okay, so to summarize, I guess, I'm all for clarity on the original ordinances that you talked about and taking out that unnecessary step. I'm in favor of business regulations as the first step. I think the graffiti is fine, and I guess I'd like to see some more information about panhandling. I'm not sure where to go on that. I mean, I appreciate the issues about safety and so on, but are we? I mean, I see these people, but I've never seen them step out into traffic, and I've never been particularly bothered by them. So I don't know. It's a hard one for me.
Councilmember Coomber?
As I already said, I'd really like to mitigate the burden on downtown business if we're going to talk about use permits. So that's one of my biggest issues with them. Graffiti, I'm pretty much on board with you here. I just I like the change. I'm not sure how we modify the ability to lien, but I think we're on good standing if we go around solid ground if we pick and choose, who we're going to lien. And I think of innocent homeowners the city comes out and cleans up your walls, and then all of a sudden they get a bill from the city or they have a lien on their property. And I just, it's just a basic element of fairness that doesn't take into account anything that's written in the code books. The panhandling, I'm aware of a lot of the issues with the free speech and stuff. And I kind of break panhandling down to, if you're stopping me from going by you on the sidewalk, one unfortunate gentleman didn't like that. He grabbed me by the shoulder when I passed him already, and he got a couple of broken ribs several years ago. But I don't like, that's when it becomes a criminal act. As far as I'm concerned. I don't know that a panhandling, I don't know that it's so pervasive downtown or even at stores and things. I'm aware of the Safeway island out there. I'm not sure what our ability to do anything about that. Isn't that on private property? I didn't know if we could do something to have anything to do with that spot. I know that several people get very uneasy when they're being approached by people at that spot. We are not one of them. We know how to say no, and it's not hard. But I've just given the free speech element of that. It's going to be hard if you can think of a way, or do some research and find out who's been successful with an anti-aggressive panhandling ordinance. I would love to see some examples of where it's worked and not been challenged in court as a First Amendment problem. That would be my criteria. Otherwise, nobody should feel unsafe walking around town anywhere. Mm-hmm. And that's my main concern. And some people are some people feel unsafe when people pass them on the street. There's extremes to everything. But when aggressive panhandlers, in my case, have been dealt with, as criminal events, either a battery or whatever happened. Don't ever grab me. This is one of those things I object to. And things like that happen. They're pretty easy to break it down to that kind of a violation instead of having to craft a new ordinance. However, if one is available, if it's for the community considers it's in our interest to have something like that, if we find that problem is so pervasive, and I haven't seen that yet, taking a look and see what's working out there in other places might be a good idea.
I agree with Councilmember Coomber. People should feel safe in our community, and I have gotten complaints from folks that did not feel safe in the downtown. So, again, targeting the behaviors, not necessarily the mechanism, or the reason, but to target the behaviors themselves. How do we recover the cost for the hearing officers if we're having to hire someone from the outside? Is that burden go to the party that is committing the offense?
Yes, the city would try to recover those costs from the offender if the hearing officer does sustain and find that the violation did occur.
Okay. And with regards to the graffiti and the abatement, in the ordinance, it talks about that it's unsightly. But my main concern about graffiti is that it really, in my mind, is a public safety hazard because as it addresses later on in the ordinance, it does encourage other bad behaviors, and that just it mushrooms and it continues to grow. And as I said, there's other activities that that the graffiti inspires. I've actually cleaned up 5 tags in the last week. I've got a graffiti cleanup kit in my truck, and so I take this very seriously about keeping the town looking nice. And the other thing that we can do is understanding that there are homeowners that maybe not be able to abate the graffiti on their fence or on the back wall. We can also coordinate with volunteers. I've got a crew of about 35 graffiti fighters out there, and working with the Jeff Schaefer and the volunteer group that we have. There's an opportunity to have volunteers that we actually, about 15 years ago, we had a group of people that went out and painted graffiti. That's sort of gone away. I know that there were some liability issues. But looking for community volunteers, we can tap into CityServe. CityServe uses justserve.org as a mechanism to recruit volunteers to use their skills to address the needs of others. And so there may be opportunities to find community volunteers to help abate that graffiti as well, especially for some of the homeowners. So there's some opportunity there to make that work. I think that this is going in the right direction. I like the fact that we are finding ways to encourage good behaviors in the downtown and to keep an eye on what's going on down there. So I support where we are on this. With regards to the aggressive panhandling, again, we need to address the bad behaviors, and but again, I like where we are on this.
So can I?
Sure.
So let me just, if I may, just you're asking for direction. So if I could just try something, then I know you'll fix what I say. So I think what I heard was everybody's behind the business regulations as a reasonable solution. That the conditional use permit, we got to make sure, we got to think about it, but we're asking you to give us more information and understand how we can mitigate the cost impact. That we're all kind of in favor of making sure we can clean up the graffiti and acknowledging the issue of when people can actually pay for it. I mean, I don't know if we're particularly sympathetic to the federal government, but we understand that that's an important first thing that needs to be cleaned up, and that we want to take care of it on a timely basis. And that what I think I heard was the aggressive panhandling. We've heard that it's important for people to feel safe in town. That's a more problematic thing to figure out the right solution, but the idea is to focus on the public safety aspect of it and to perhaps bring us more compelling data as to why we might need to do something. Is that a fair summary?
I think so.
If I can just characterize that last time with regard to aggressive panhandling, I think you summed up the council's direction, but I would just request that we would continue to monitor the state of the law and, where possible, seek other enforcement opportunities.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that's the direction.
So with that, we have a motion to...
Well, so that's the direction, so we don't need a motion on the direction. We've got 4 heads nodding on that. We do need a motion on the ordinance, however, to introduce the ordinance.
Okay.
So I would... The ordinance for the
amendments to the ordinance to amend Chapter 8.14.
Oh, okay. So I move we amend the ordinance as suggested.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made by Vice Mayor Warner, seconded by Councilmember Coomber. And you have sufficient direction at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take the mitigation agreements and then take the break?
Let's see. How long do we expect the? We'll go for it. Okay, mitigation agreement. Okay, this is Carl Zeiss Pension Trust Fund Properties and the sale of Newport Point LLC.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand, members of the City Council. The proposal before you tonight is 2 agreements that would allow third parties to conduct environmental enhancement activities and purchase a conservation easement on city-owned property at the Springtown Preserve. The Springtown Alkali Sink is located on the northeast side of Livermore Valley and lies generally between the urban areas within the city limits to the south and Brushy Peak and the ridgelines to the north. The city owns approximately 300 acres on the southern side of the sink, shown here in red. It's bounded by Lorraine Road on the west, Raymond Road to the north, and again is surrounded by urban development on the east and south. Located on the southern boundary, approximately here, is an existing multi-use trail that connects these 2 neighborhoods. The Springtown Alkali Sink supports a unique and rare alkali wetland complex that is also known habitat for several sensitive animal and plant species. Generally, this occurs because water flows off the nearby hills. They used to be part of an inland sea, and it's captured in these basins, resulting in these alkali soils and this unique but harsh environment. And there's evidence of that effect here shown on the aerial. So this hydraulic effect has led to the formation of vernal pools and seasonal wetlands, and the area provides habitat for a variety of rare and unique species, many of which are only found out here. So here is an example of a seasonal wetland, and these are fairy shrimp that are potentially found in that habitat. This is bird's beak, which is very unique to this sort of environment. And of course, this is the Livermore tar plant, which is also the city's official flower. Not unique to alkali habitats, but is a special status species, is the burrowing owl, also found out here, not particularly in the wetlands, but in the uplands outside of the pools. Unfortunately, these resources that make this place unique are threatened by invasive species encroaching into the site, so noxious weeds moving in, non-native plants competing with the natives. Also threatening these resources are illegal off-road vehicle use and general trespass. City's properties currently do not have any permanent protections or management that are typically found with a conservation easement and a corresponding endowment. City staff has been convening an informal working group over the past few years. It's comprised of key stakeholders from LARPD, Zone 7 Water Agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Native Plant Society, Friends of the Springtown Preserve, Tri-Valley Conservancy, and the Audubon Society. This group has identified short and long-term goals aimed at protecting the resources in this area. Additional fencing, educating the community, and removing invasive weeds are short-term efforts that could significantly benefit this unique habitat. Additionally, the group has identified restoring the wetland complex as an effort that would further protect and enhance these unique resources. For several years, the city has explored creative solutions to protect these resources. Consistent with council direction, staff has pursued the establishment of a conservation and mitigation bank that would permanently protect the property, again, through a conservation easement, management plan, some restoration activities, and a long-term endowment. That complex effort is still ongoing, but in the meantime, the opportunity to sell a conservation easement and do some restoration activities, similar to what the city has done with the Doolin Road properties, has presented itself. The terms for both agreements include funding to conduct the enhancement activities and terms and timings of deposits and key deliverables. Per both agreements, WRA Inc. would conduct these activities. Under their agreement, Newport Point would provide $124,000 to construct fencing and remove invasive weeds in order to satisfy their mitigation requirements for a project in Discovery Bay. Fencing exist generally around the perimeter of the site, except along here where the multi-use trail is. And so that money would go towards fencing this area. The weed removal would again occur in this general area as well. Under the other agreement, Zeiss would purchase a 40-acre conservation easement outlined here with the yellow dashed line and conduct wetland restoration activities again in the same area. And consistent with a conservation easement would also include a management plan and endowment. In addition, the agreement would install interpretive signage along the multi-use trail and the new fence as an educational campaign to make people aware of the unique resources of the site. The conservation easement and restoration activities would compensate for Zeiss's project impacts associated with their infill research and development campus near the Dublin BART station. Under the terms of the agreement, the city would receive a purchase price of $400,000 plus approximately $150,000 for mitigation service fee. Zeiss would be responsible for paying all costs associated with and responsible for obtaining any regulatory permits, and also would be responsible for the work occurring on the site. They would also cover the administrative costs, city's administrative costs associated with the project. And again, as part of the agreement, Zeiss would provide an endowment that would cover the management and monitoring activities in perpetuity to manage the easement area, and this would include fence repair, sign replacement and repair, and the city's administrative costs. Staff has had preliminary conversations with the Tri-Valley Conservancy about holding this particular easement. Those conversations would continue. And the city has had a long working relationship with the Conservancy. They not only hold many of the conservation easements in South Livermore Valley for the vineyards, but they also hold easements with the LARPD for Upper Sycamore Grove Park and with the city in Doolin Canyon. So staff recommends that the council adopt a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute the agreements and subsequent transaction documents, including non-substantive amendments to the agreements, and commit the funds received from these agreements to open space acquisition and management purposes. That concludes staff's report. Consultants representing both Newport Point and Zeiss are here. They do not have a presentation, but they are available for questions, as is staff. Thank you.
Questions?
So let me understand this. We have two developers that are not in the city of Livermore. One's in Discovery Bay and one's in Dublin, yet they're going to invest a lot of money to help us out with this particular preserve. Is that right? In perpetuity?
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
That's a pretty sweet deal.
Yes, that's correct.
So can you just tell me who, I don't know who WRA Inc. is. They're the outfit that's going to do a lot of the weed abatement and so on, right?
Yeah, WRA is an environmental consulting firm. The city's worked with them in the past. They were the consulting firm. They are the consulting firm helping us with the mitigation banking and the conservation banking. So in addition, they come across other opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Coomber?
For what issues when people are running around out there in ATVs and things, are we responsible for enforcement if we run across it, or is that an LARPD thing, or should it be an LARPD thing? Not necessarily as part of this thing, but something to consider down the line. Because I know I'm familiar with the vernal pools that were evaporated by development in Dublin along 580 years ago, but I'm glad we're getting to preserve this place. It deserves it. I just don't know how we're going to keep it from being, I know I'm out there a lot, and you see places where kids are building bicycle jumps. I think it's just one of those things kids are going to do, unfortunately. But there's a lot of real cool stuff out there, and I think we're really lucky to have this opportunity, quite honestly, to gain this property. But do we have somebody that we can, if there's a problem out there, or somebody considers a resident sees somebody out there, is it LPD or is it LARPD, or could it be?
Right now, it's under the responsibility for Livermore Police Department. And we've been, as part of our informal group over the last 10 years or so, we've had an LARPD member on board for input into the any sort of recreational aspects that may come along. But at this point, it's we have not engaged them about running the park.
Yeah, they have such a great interpretive staff. I mean, they know their stuff about fairy shrimp, believe me. Nobody knows their stuff about fairy shrimp like the rangers. So it's kind of a cool place and maybe an opportunity for them too that we should explore.
Any questions? Okay, I've got 2 cards. So I'm going to open the public comment period. Connie Copps and Nancy Bankhead.
Mayor, staff, city council members, I would like you to not vote on this item tonight, but to pull it to learn more about it before you make decisions on it. Seeing that Robert Carling wasn't really sure who RA was, and given the fact that there's a lot to this initiative, and it's a lot, like I had questions, I saw red flags, I was curious, but I didn't have a time frame to submit written comments in a timely manner because there was so much here that I had to, a learning curve that I had to try to understand. I think that for a long time I've been trying to have some questions answered on the ownership of the land in the Springtown area. And when I called the county, the records could only go back so far. So for me to get the information I was looking for, I would need more time to fully understand this. Also, I don't understand the process as well. Like when escrow closes on this, what happens then? If this is perpetuity, I don't get how they can close on an escrow, but then they're responsible for it forever. So there's things that I feel are unfair if you answer. If you put this through tonight. My questions that I sent, out to LAFCO, it took 2 months to get a response, and it's not even a thorough response. I have to go down to Oakland to the records department because the county would only go back so far on the deeds on this land. And again, there were annexation agreements in that area. And when the city purchased area in the land, it was my understanding that there was maybe a fire station given, you hear all this, and a library given. And, so far Springtown, out of this for sure gets some weeds pulled and a barbed wire fence. I think that we need to learn more before we turn this over. It sounds like a sweet deal, but let's make sure it is. We could actually learn more about who this Mr. Zeese is, Carl Zeese Pension Trust Properties, LLC. It's my understanding that he built a research hospital on county land, and so to offset, some land there, they're putting it over here. But with all these unanswered questions in Springtown, it's hard to answer this intelligently. And I really think that even though it sounds like a good idea, perpetuity is kind of a long time. And I would like us to fully understand backward and forward what we're signing on to, because again, perpetuity is a long time. And I think that in the past, perpetuity agreements were done on Springtown and they were never followed through with. So let's do our homework. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Copps. Next is Nancy Bankhead.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bankhead. I grew up on a ranch. I've fixed umpteen miles of fence. Saying you're going to build a fence doesn't mean anything to me. What type of fence are you going to build? Are you building another barbed wire fence that won't hold out a four-wheel drive pickup? Motorcycles cut wires. I just built fence 2 years ago. It's a pipe driven into the ground 3-4 feet, and then it's pipe on the bottom, cable in the middle, and pipe on the top, and it's 5 feet tall. That's a fence. But you've got developers out there that need mitigation. They're not doing this for their health. They're doing it because they want to make money in Dublin and wherever the other place is. So make them put up a fantastic fence. Southwest Fencing does the best. They're here in the valley. Get a good fence, because that property is so open and nobody's there that there's garbage dumped there almost once a week on that road because there's nobody out there, so they can. So get up a decent fence. If they're going to give it to you, ask for something good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bankhead. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period. Okay, there were several questions about the provenance of the land. I sit on LAFCO, and I understand LAFCO is about the sphere of influence for the provision of services. So when they're providing police and fire and water and sewer and those sorts of things, that's what the LAFCO does. And so it's the open space is a little more of a gray area. And of course, Carl Zeiss is the lens and medical device manufacturer. So they've been around for years. I've worked with Carl Zeiss lenses you probably have too. Mm-hmm. So comments?
Yeah, what about the fence?
Pardon?
Let's ask Andy and Mr. Stewart about the fence.
So right now, the concept would be a 3 or 5 strand barbed wire fence consistent with what's out there now. But we are still in design phase.
It sounds like a really good comment that what we have out there right now isn't really working. So since we've got folks that are buying mitigation land, it might be a good opportunity to get something that actually will work.
Yeah, this is a piece of wetland that really deserves better protection than something you can drive through with my truck.
Yep. I think we ought to pay attention to the fence expert.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there is no fence along this stretch.
Right.
So
no, I understand.
There needs to be.
Right.
And yeah, barbed wire is cheap, but it doesn't take anything to go through it. And if we're serious about protecting this area, then maybe now's the time to start making those efforts, especially when we've got somebody that's interested and they need the mitigation land.
We've explored and can continue to explore a more durable type of fencing, but in addition to just the construction of fencing, it comes with monitoring. There'll be more eyes on it, and hopefully it'll serve as a deterrent to those who want to go out there and do not so nice things.
Right. If it's a more robust fence, it requires fewer eyes.
If it's a matter of cost, maybe we can make the agreement perpetuity minus two years, something like that.
And that is part of the cost that drove up the endowment amount was fence replacement. It's one of the more costlier options.
Okay, any other comments? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution, memo of agreement, purchase and sale agreement, and the proceeds to funding the open space purposes?
I'll move we accept staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Vice Mayor Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Very good. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break here. And I mean 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about the healthcare initiative. 5 minutes, see you in a couple. Okay, great. Welcome back to part 2 of the August 13th Livermore City Council meeting. We're now back to consider the 6.03, that is the healthcare initiative and the rebuttal to the argument in favor of. So, did we lose our staff? Take it away.
Your staff, again, is your council subcommittee.
Oh, very good.
So
Okay.
this evening
That's
they will
right.
present to you the rebuttal argument that they have prepared and seek council input, and whether it meets with your satisfaction, so it can be submitted to the city clerk and included in the voter guide.
Okay. So comments from the subcommittee. And again, I want to thank Councilmember Warner and Vice Mayor Warner and Councilmember Carling for the great work and the time and effort that they put into this. It certainly showed the argument against was very well written, and I was very impressed with the time that you guys put on this one as well. So if you had some additional comments that you would like to make.
No, I think we're
It
looking.
speaks for itself.
Well, no, I think we obviously spent a little bit of time working on this, and looking forward to your comments and going from there.
Well, I had quite a few comments on the last one, and I think that turned out very well with the foundation that you guys put. The only change that I would make or even suggest, and where it says a very burdensome regulatory bureaucracy taking away funding, and you have 4 needed city services, I would suggest taking away funding from needed city services.
Okay. I noticed that. That's perfect.
I beat you to it. Okay, so, but other than that, I mean, I was very impressed. Yeah, you nailed all of the important points.
Where can
Oh, my session is expired. All of our sessions expired.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Do we try refresh? You're not connected to the network. Well, you know what? The fact that we only changed one word, I think that we're probably good on this. Someday when we have a decent council chambers with an emergency operations center, we'll probably have some connectivity to a network. Oh, very good.
Okay.
Oh. Shared OneDrive. Office home. Well, now that they used to call me the sorcerer's apprentice because I could do things on a computer that nobody could redo.
Sarah, are you changing? Oh, Neil's changing. Okay.
Oh, he got that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're done with the computers. Okay, we got it. Thank you. Okay, so taking away funding from needed city services. Right. Okay. Councilmember Coomber?
No, I told when I first saw this evening, I was so impressed with the first 2 sentences. I was
yeah.
The rest of it falls in line, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything that stuck out to me. I had a for from question 2, so I'm glad you brought that up. But
yeah, I started to write my own rebuttal to start with, and then I just said I read the first couple of lines. It's like, yeah, nailed it.
yeah, exactly. I think that kind of says it all.
Okay.
No, I didn't have any other criticisms at this point or amendments.
You don't have comments on this, or do
No,
you?
do we have any no comment cards? Anybody wish to speak, or are you just holding your breath?
The folks that are here? No?
Okay. Any further comments, questions?
So just one point of order I'd like to draw to the council's attention. We are short one council member today. So if this is the council's collective wisdom to have this be your rebuttal argument, we can extend an opportunity to our absent council member to see if he would like to sign or has an opportunity to sign. If not, it would proceed as it is today, but it would just lack one signature. So Councilor Spadowski would not be signing unless he actually can get a signature, sign it, and get it back to the city clerk.
Okay. All right.
What's the time frame for that?
The 16th.
Oh, okay.
And that the undersigned authors, that's the primary argument, that doesn't count against our words, right? That's just procedural language.
That is correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to also congratulate the other 2 Bobs here for taking this on, and yeah, just a really, really good job. Just fantastic, real impressive work.
All right. Well, with that, do I have a motion to accept the argument?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made by Councilmember Coomber, seconded by Vice Mayor Warner.
And we're giving Councilmember Spadowski a chance to sign?
Yes. That's included in that. Agreed. All right. With that, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Very good. Thank you very much. Finally, last item, we have the matters initiated and council reports. Councilmember Coomber.
Well, I don't have much to put on the docket. We've been off at LAFTA for the month, and I would say I spent a lot of time at the Little League World Series this year, which was an impressive World Series, as our local team, the Livermore Little League team, intermediate Little League team, came in second place. played in the finals and lost to Korea.
Actually, they won the national
Won the
championship.
national championship.
They were the
Thank you
national
for that.
champions
Yes.
in the Little League Intermediate World Series.
And I think at least 3 of us got to throw out first pitches.
Yeah.
And it was always fun to do that. It's great to see these teams from all over the world. I spent a lot of time down there talking to them. I was favoring the international teams. The Australian team was my favorite. They've never been there before, and they were great people, great folks. So we spent a lot of time. But my heartiest congratulations to the Livermore Intermediate Little League team and for their national championship and second place internationally.
Yeah. Councilor Carling.
Thank you. Yes, July 25th, I had a stop waste meeting. On the 30th was, as Councilmember Coomer mentioned, several of us participated and got to throw out a ceremonial first pitch. Actually, I didn't do it. I had my 8-year-old grandson do it.
That's awesome.
And so it was terrific. I mean, they treated him so well, and the whole organization of this international or intermediate World Series is just fantastic. I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the folks that operate that and bring that particular competition to the city. It really, they do a great job, and it was a lot of fun being there for the final game. There, I don't know how many people were there. I mean, place was packed.
Thousands.
Yeah, and it was certainly great to see it. And we didn't stay for the whole game, but we went home and caught the end of it on ESPN. And they were very complimentary about the Livermore team and about Livermore in general. I think we should all be proud of that particular event here in the city. And then on August 7th, I participated in National Night Out. I'm disappointed that the chief has left because he and I rode together. And I'll have to say, one problem with going with the chief is nobody pays attention to me. So, because he's in full uniform, he pull up in a police car, and of course all the kids are just wanting to talk to the police chief. But it was great.
And he's got the stickers, too.
He had the stickers. I had no stickers. But I will say that we went to 5 locations, and I have to admit it was well organized, and the people were just terrific at each of the 5 locations. And one of the things that I came away with was the comments, and it was very, very heartening to hear all the that I heard so many positive comments about what we're doing with the downtown. And that was really heartwarming to hear that at a variety of locations throughout the city. So it was a great event, and I enjoyed going around with the chief, even though he was in uniform and I wasn't.
Vice Mayor Warner.
Yeah, one thing to report, and that's went to the Altamont Landfill Open Space Committee. And one of the topics that is of interest here, and we'll come back to the council, was should the open space funds be used to help pay for the bridge that the Tri-Valley Conservancy wants to do? And so we were in favor of that, but I brought up, and we'll check it. Is that an appropriate use of those funds, and does it fit within the documents that form the Altamont Open Space Committee? And it looks, talking with the legal counsel at the point at that meeting, it is potentially makes sense, but we're going to double check that. And then the second question is this an appropriate amount, because they're looking for $500,000. So both of those things, I think, are being researched as part of due diligence, and should that pan out, then we'll be seeing that in the future here. So that's the main thing. And then I just wanted to double check, on with respect to matters initiated. So we're going to find out about the First Street and Livermore Avenue intersection. I mean, we'll get some information.
We can provide a memo back to you on that.
If you could,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that it goes to Mr. Barker as well. That's it.
Very good. Again, National Night Out. There were 50 neighborhood get-togethers for the National Night Out, and we went to. I think we went to 8 of them. I had Captain Young. We did get kind of waylaid because the city is doing a competition on a lip syncing effort. That was an absolute riot. That was quite fun. But it's funny. A lot of positive comments in the downtown, but a number of people come up and said, "When do we get our money refunded from BART?" And I explained to them. I said, Alameda County voted to go into the BART system, and Livermore was part of the Alameda County that voted to go into that. So Alameda County is going to have to vote to let us out, and if they vote to let us out, they're probably going to have to vote Newark and the city of Alameda out, which means they get to all pay more. So the odds of that are slim and none. So I got through the explanations, and they go, "Oh, yeah, well, I didn't really think we were going to get it back, but I thought I'd ask." So hope springs eternal, but yeah, not going to happen. And today I had the Alameda County Transportation Commission meeting. We authorized moving ahead with the 7th Street grade separation. It's a $500 million project, and it's going to enable rail and trucks to get into the Port of Oakland with less impact on the neighborhoods and moving more goods and freight out of the port. So getting rid of that bottleneck. As far as matters initiated, this has come up, the commission and committee appointments. I just want to run this past anybody. There are commissions and committees where we have a very difficult time getting people to apply for these. And at the same time, we have term limits, which they term out of the commission or the committee. And if we have a hard time getting people and we've got good people on it, my thought is we can just revisit the term limits for the commissions and committees. So, okay, we got 4 nods there. Okay, great. Just have that come back. And with that, I would like to adjourn the meeting in memory of Sandy Thorne. Sandy Thorne was the wife of Pleasanton Mayor Jerry Thorne. Very involved in her community, very involved in many of the aspects of their downtown and the museum. And she was always came with Jerry every time to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. She was very engaged and very involved, and she will very much be missed. So I will adjourn the meeting in memory of Sandy Thorne. Thank you.